change is hard in anything that we do. And I could completely understand picketing 66 when it was coming, but now we live with it and it's great. Yeah. I could completely see people picketing because they didn't want the metro coming through. Now we see it's pretty great. Right. So I can understand right now people picketing because we don't want multifamily living right across the street from our single family home neighborhood that we've loved for so long. But that's the good thing about living in an area that hopefully they take this seriously and they look at the aesthetics of these things that are being built and they take into account public feedback and that they make the right decisions.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt. That is Shawn. Welcome to our show, Shawn. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest changes to Arlington County's zoning in the history of the county, and that is the Missing Middle zoning changes have been approved. They were approved unanimously 5-0 by the Arlington County Board last week. And now comes the impact. What's going to happen to property values? What's going to happen to expanded inventory in Arlington County? And where are we going to be a couple years from now, Shawn? This is one of the most exciting things, exciting depending on who you ask, one of the most significant real estate events that has happened in Arlington County, since Amazon HQ2. And I would argue that it's much more significant than Amazon HQ2, if that gives you any inclination of the gravity of what was passed last week. So, Shawn, let's start off with what is Missing Middle? What is Missing Middle, and what will happen in what is now approved in Arlington County? Do you want to give us a rundown, or you want me to?
I mean, I'll start, and then you can take over. So first of all, I'm not an expert on this. We're learning as we go, and I think there's going to be multiple shows on this. As we learn more, we'll give it to you. But basically, the Missing Middle is not an income valuation. It's not a middle income. It is the missing middle housing, meaning there aren't enough medium-sized homes, townhouses, for people to choose from. Now, if you know Arlington, we have some corridors where we have a lot of high-rise condos, and those are, your smaller 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom to 3-bedroom condos. And then just outside those corridors, we have single-family home designated areas. And 75% of Arlington is designated single-family home structure. So what the Missing Middle is trying to say is, hey, we don't have enough of the townhouses, of the smaller, not, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 square foot homes. We need more of the 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 square foot townhouse style places so that we have a diverse choice of housing for people.
Yeah, so you have your huge 500 unit apartment condo complexes, massive buildings right on top of the metro, and then you go a little bit further out and you have a single family house on a large lot, and essentially it's filling in the gaps in between of the duplexes, the townhouses, the 4 to 6 unit multiplexes.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you look at most cities, this is how they run. You have a corridor that is very business district and high-rise condos, high-rise commercial buildings. And then as you break out, it gets less and less of that and more into the single-family districts, right? And that's kind of how cities are born and how they're made. And so I guess what Arlington is trying to do is to add more of this living space out a little bit further from that main corridor.
Well, it's density, right? And it's if you want to call it smart density, Arlington is trying to do smart growth, and they've been awarded in the past for smart growth along the Roslyn to Ballston corridor, specifically in Clarendon. The idea of building a metro, building public transportation, building the infrastructure, having the density over the public transportation and then tapering it off as you get into the single family houses. And we literally see that. The building that comes to mind is Windsor Plaza in Ballston, where you literally have like the 7th story in the middle of the building. Then when you get a little closer to the townhouse side away from the metro, it goes 6, 5, 4. And then like literally the tallest part of the building closest to the townhouses is not that much different in height, which brings us to the next point, is that these properties that are going to be built under Missing Middle, they have to conform to the same or similar specifications that the single family houses have to as well. So when people think, oh, Missing Middle, there's going to be a bunch of apartment complexes in my neighborhood. Well, there are a lot of rules in place that are going to severely limit what developers can actually build in specific areas. So it's you're not going to see these ugly, I guess, multi-family buildings. It's going to be something more in line with the character of the neighborhood.
We're hoping, and that's the key thing here. And I think mainly one of the reasons that people might be against this is because they don't want it to screw up the aesthetics of the beautiful neighborhoods that make up Arlington. And there are so many gorgeous neighborhoods. I live in Terrell Way Heights. I love it. I mean, and just like Lyon Village. Lyon Village is one of the most expensive areas in Arlington. It's gorgeous, but it's right against the metro line. But if you walk through that neighborhood, it's beautiful, right? I mean, everybody wants to be there, but this is $2 million, $3 million homes that are sitting in there. So I think the main thing is they don't want it to break up the aesthetics.
Well, then the fear is that, okay, well, if you think that it's just going to be filled with a bunch of multifamily buildings, who is going to be building these multifamily buildings? Does the economics actually make sense? Because whether it's, Lyon Village, Lyon Park, Ashton Heights, or you go a little bit north to Bellevue Forest, Country Club Hills, these neighborhoods that have, predominantly been single family houses. And sure, Lyon Village has some townhouses, Lyon Park has some townhouses, but is a developer really going to come in and say, you know what, Country Club Hills, let's build a 6-unit multiplex here where I could sell one house for, $4 million? I don't think so. Maybe, in Lyon Village, we're pushing the $4 million mark as well. So it's going to be very expensive to build 4 to 6 unit properties. So I'm a little pessimistic on the number of 4 to 6 unit buildings that will be built, because Arlington County has implemented a annual development cap of 58 permits, and that's broken down depending on the size of your lot. So to give you an example, 21 permits are spread across R8, R10, and R12. The numbers just add 1,000 to it, and that's how many square feet is allowed. So R8, you have an 8,000 square foot lot. 30 permits are for R6, and then 7 permits are for the R5 district. So there's only 58 permits annually, and we already know Arlington County's permitting system, I think, is backed up as it is. So this idea that the county is going to be flooded with multiplexes in neighborhoods where people aren't used to them, I don't know if that's going to come to fruition.
Well, and I think it's a good thing that it's only 58 the first year, and 58 might seem like a lot. I don't know, but I'm glad it's capped right now, because this is a working thing that is moving forward. All right, it's passed. There's nothing we can do about it, whether you're for it or against it. But now it's like figuring it out. And I was reading articles where even the people on the board are like, listen, we're figuring this out as we kind of go, because we need this type of housing. How do we then do it? And there's no easy way of doing it, but just moving forward with it to see what works and what doesn't. And they've got to be careful on this, on the permitting, and they've got to be careful, because once you do something wrong, you're going to have people up in arms against it again.
Yeah, and I like that Arlington is being more strict about it. And, the 58 permits, it's a 5-year sunset cap. So after 5 years, I don't want to say the floodgates are open, but there's no longer that cap of 58. And you say the Arlington County Board is trying to figure out as it goes. There are other models out there, other cities that have done this. Portland's done this. Minneapolis has done this. Now, Minneapolis in 2018 did the same thing, And so far, allegedly, it's led to under 100 of these units in the past, 5 or 6 years. So you can kind of do the math on how many people are actually building these types of properties.
Yeah. Another thing I want to get into, if we can, is kind of how many townhouses are available right now for purchase or in the Arlington areas, right? So it might behoove us to say, all right, what are our numbers? So I just did a quick search just to see how many duplexes, triplexes, townhouses were available for sale and under contract in the last 6 months. Do you have any, I guess?
I mean, for triplexes, I would say 0.
You're right.
For duplex, I mean,
townhouses, any
duplex.
Interior,
can we
exterior?
Define a duplex? Because a duplex is that one unit on top of the other in a single family house. Is that what a duplex is?
That's a duplex. It can also be a one shared wall between the two.
One shared wall between the two.
So it can be side by side. That's a duplex, or one on top of the other. There's not many in Arlington. I've seen a few, but it's like those were built a long time ago, and there's not many.
I can't guess at how many townhouses for sale. I'll say in the county, there's 75 townhouses for sale.
Okay, well, in the last 6 months, how many have sold or for sale?
So 7 times 6, 6 times 6 is 30. Oh, I don't know, 300.
231.
Okay.
So 231. So that gives us an idea of how many.
Which is not a lot.
It's not a lot, but these can be condo townhouses. So there's a lot of lines being drawn in different.
Is that condo ownership? Because, Missing Middle, it says, hey, 4 to 6 units, you can build apartments, you can build condos. I don't know how many people are going to be building 6-unit condo buildings. Condos are a hassle to get up, the insurance and the reserves and the condo fees. Because I'm thinking if you're building a 4 to 6 unit multiplex, you're not going to be, living in the penthouse of that unit, right? It's going to be a builder that's going to be building the 4 to 6. It's not going to be some, home flipper or some wholesaler that's like, oh, I got this great deal. Let me just build a 4 to 6 unit building. It's going to be someone that is going to be building that for profit, and it's not going to be, some part-time builder, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I just revised my search, and of the 231, most of them were actually condo living. So even though they're labeled as a townhouse or whatever they were condo townhouses. The fee simple townhouse, meaning there is no condo ownership in this, was in the last 6 months 107.
Yeah,
in all of Arlington.
Not a lot. So I'm in favor of density. I'm in favor of smart density. How can we get more people into this amazing county that I've been blessed to call home, my whole life. And, I've been very blessed and privileged, if you will. And a lot of the arguments have been around affordability, Shawn. We run the numbers. If someone is going to build 3 townhouses you brought up Terra earlier. So I don't think that Terra is going to be a great neighborhood to build a 6-unit multiplex, because oftentimes if you are looking to rent an apartment in Arlington, you're probably working in the district or working in Tyson's or working on somewhere where you need a metro line. And so being able to walk to the metro is going to be paramount to everything else, in my opinion. So I think that your neighborhood is probably ripe for the duplexes or the 3 townhomes, especially if it's R8. So, Shawn, there are townhouses in Westover. There's brand new as of a couple years ago townhouses. Yeah. I don't know what those go for offhand, but Shawn, if there were 3 new townhouses on your street in your neighborhood, what would they be going for?
They're going to go for $1.3 million. 1.2, 1.1, 1.2, between 1. Depending on the size, right? I mean, in Westover, they're going for about 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 million. So, and it depends again on the size, but that's going to be the same thing again. So when people argue about price, which this shouldn't be about price, but they're going to be expensive. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, they're going to be $1 million. So that's the argument that people try to make, that, the missing middle is a missing middle income. That's not the argument that people are trying to make. They're trying to make the fact that there's a missing middle of this size of home. They're still going to be expensive.
Yeah, they're trying to. The goal of the missing middle is to provide a better collection of housing inventory, right? More
Correct.
Than just single family houses, more than just large buildings. But if you're telling me that there's, so let me ask a better question. in your neighborhood, if a townhouse is going for 1.3 brand new in this hypothetical situation, what would a state-of-the-art brand new construction house go for in your neighborhood?
Between 2.1 to 2.3 million.
Okay, 2.3. So now we have 3 options at half the price of the single-family house.
Yep.
So
3 options at half the price.
So now we have 3 more, families or young professionals that could essentially afford, and afford is a tough word to use, because if you're buying a $1.3 million townhouse, I mean, what sort of income do you have to have? 200,000, to afford something like that?
Yeah. You have to be higher earners even to get into that 1.3 range. But here's the thing, and here's why people are staunchly against this. A lot of people is Arlington is awesome. I moved to Arlington, when I first was able to purchase, my first place, I wanted to live in Arlington. I couldn't afford it. So I moved somewhere else. And then I sold another one, and I sold another one. And then after 18 years of work and moving up, I was finally able to purchase a home in Arlington. And one thing that I did during that course was say, all right, do I want to buy a house in Arlington that is small, or do I want to buy a house in Falls Church? And so that's what a lot of people do, is say, all right, well, I can buy more house in Falls Church. And that's exactly what I did. For a little while, I bought in Lake Barcroft because I got a much larger home at the time that suited my needs. Then I sold that, made a profit, and came back to Arlington and bought the house that I'm currently in. But it was multi-moves for me to be able to afford what I wanted in Arlington. I couldn't just say, hey, I'm moving here right away because this is what I want. No, I had to work for it. So now what me or with a lot of people would say is, all right, I worked so hard to get to where I am, and I love my neighborhood the way it is, and it's been this way for a long time. Once you start changing the neighborhood after it's been this way for a long time, it's hard for people to conceptualize. Not only that, there are a lot of changes that have to happen on top of that. And one thing that people look at when they're looking at a single family home is what is next to it, what is behind it, what is on the other side of it, what is in front of it. That means a lot to values. And so when you start to put different things in front, behind, or wherever next to these houses, if it's smaller, it's going to pull down the value, in my opinion, because you ever hear that saying, you don't want to be the biggest house on the market.
You don't want to be the most expensive house. I've heard that one.
Yeah, you don't want to be the most expensive house on the street, and that's basically what it's doing. Is pulling, in my opinion, pulling down the values of the other real estate in the area. Now, one could argue, it's actually uplifting values, because now what happens is the tax value goes up. So maybe this is a reason that Arlington County wanted this, because think about it. 75% of Arlington is single family home. How can we increase the tax base on this? They can then divide these single family lots into 3. All right. Now a $2 million place now becomes a $3 million or over $3.5, $3.6 million worth of tax base that they can get. So there may be, a push and pull on, all right, how does Arlington County maximize this land area that we have for taxes? And that's one good. So that could be an argument that somebody that is against it could say. And I believe that in return, if they're done really well, I can see how it could look nice. Okay. But there are other factors that could come into this as well. And one big thing that I see on my street, I think streets look really good without a ton of cars on it. And when you start creating townhouses or multifamily units, I think the thing they said is they need 0.8 parking spaces per unit, something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's not 1 per 1 or whatever. They are requiring some off-street parking, which I think is needed. But then what happens is when you have multiple cars, you're going to start parking them on the street. And just as an instance, when I go down my street, there are a lot of cars parked for the hospital. I live about 4 blocks from the hospital. And so the bus stop for my kids is right at the end of that street. And so there's a lot of cars parked at the end because that's where the zoning stops and you can park there freely. And so when we get down there, we're ducking behind cars when cars come. And it's honestly an unsafe area when there's a lot of cars. And so I think the aesthetics of the neighborhood, when you have a lot of cars parked on their street and not on their driveways or in their garages, it just starts pulling things down a little bit. And then the third thing would be thinking about, sewage lines. I mean, we're going to have to upgrade all of this stuff to make sure that it's working. And I don't know much about the sewage lines in Arlington, whether it has to be upgraded or whatever, but I would assume that if you're building 3 units of multi-people coming out of that, you're going to have to upgrade that sewer system. So there's a multi-level thing that's going on here. And I think that people need to start thinking about that as well when they're thinking about making these changes. And I know they are. And that's where we're all learning as we go, So
to clarify, parking at least 0.5 parking spaces on sites located within 3/4 mile radius of a Metro Rail station, or within half-mile radius of a transit stop along premium transit network, at least 1 space per dwelling unit for all other locations. Shawn, in terms of taxes, do you know how many million square feet of office space is currently vacant in Arlington County?
I don't, but it's probably a lot.
It's 9 million. 9 million and climbing rapidly. So that's a lot of tax dollars that aren't being contributed to Arlington County.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on how they get that tax dollars. Is it based on the value of the property, or is it based on the vacancy or non-vacancy rates?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I do know that commercial and residential taxes combined.
Well, here's a thought. Why not start converting those into, can we start converting commercial into residential?
It's starting to happen. I think there was one in Herndon that was just converted, and Alexandria and DC. So it's definitely starting to happen.
I think it's got to start happening at a higher rate too, because let's face it, people aren't using their office spaces anymore. And there's a ton of office space right along the orange line corridor, right along the blue line and yellow line corridor that we could turn into residential and we can make some cool things with these things, right? It's going to cost money. It's going to be expensive. Everything in Arlington is going to be expensive. And the thing is, part of the reason that single family homes are so expensive now is because costs have risen on everything that we're doing. And so supply issues have come up. The valuation on lumber and everything else has gone up, and that's increased all of these prices. So it doesn't matter what you're building. It's going to be expensive in these areas. But,
Shawn, you've always been in favor of kind of less government is better government. Is that kind of
that's me. I keep the government out of it.
Kind of like let the person do what they want to do. Kind of just, if it's my property, don't tell me, what I can and can't do. For the longest time, Arlington had been restricting homeowners in what they're able to do. They were said, hey, you can only build one property. Now they're giving homeowners and potential homeowners the possibility of doing more things with their property and no longer restricting what homeowners are able to do. So how do you feel about the government allowing homeowners less restrictions with their property?
That's a great question, Matt. Geez, you stumped me on that one, didn't you? Hey, listen, in that regard, I think you're right. People should be allowed to do what they want to do with their property. And I think that's a really good point you bring up. There are zoning laws for reasons as well. And, we have zoning laws everywhere. But you got me on that one. I don't know. I agree with you on the fact that I don't want people telling me what I can and can't do. Where it's tough is when you change a law or change an aspect of a neighborhood that has been there for a long time and, 60, 70, 80, 100 years. And now all of a sudden, all these people and their values can change dramatically based on what is built across from them. And so their life is changing because of what they're building. And so I don't know that it's fair, I guess, in some instances, but I see how in my way of thinking or your way of asking that question that, maybe allowing whatever you want to do with your land is good. But the thing is, do I want somebody, a hoarding situation next to me? No, I would hope that the government would come in and say, hey, can you clean up your property? Or do I want somebody with, cars on blocks in front of their house? No, I don't. And I'm glad that there are regulations for that. And so some government regulation and some government oversight is good. others is not. And, this is a tough situation. I mean, I'm not saying that I could be, in some instances, I could be for it. And in some instances, I'm against it, So it really depends on where you're at. And, it's hard when you actually own a single family home and love where you live and you've worked so hard to get there, and I've worked my ass off to get there. And thankfully, this isn't happening now, and it's not happening quickly, and it's going to be a slow turn into this. But, I personally wouldn't want an 8-plex across the street from me, and it could happen.
6.
6-plex. Yeah. I mean, and the reason is, it's not because I don't care who's living there. I don't, that's not it. It's the density that we're not used to in that particular area.
If I was, sorry to cut you off, if I was in charge of Arlington County parking, I would be the most hated man on the planet. There'd be no car. There'd be parking would not be allowed on the street.
Thank you. And I think
in Tokyo, in Japan, I don't think they have very strict parking rules. And I'm not trying to this isn't me trying to work around to get to another point. It's I have a car, and I don't like all the cars on the street.
I hate the cars on the street. And that's my main thing is I don't want 9,000 cars on the street. I think a street is for walking and for driving, and those not for parking in some instances, right? In these neighborhoods like that, if you've got a driveway and you've got a garage, park in your driveway in your garage.
They're saying, hey, if it's going to be within this, radius of a metro station, it's half of a car. So if there's a 6 unit, they can only have 3 parking spaces on site per the 6 unit,
which is causing 3 more cars to sit on, at least 3 cars to sit on the road in front of the place. And then it becomes where am I parking? Where do my kids play? We play in the street, we have fun in the street. It just becomes a different, all of a sudden it can change neighborhoods, one for the better in some people's eyes, one for the worse in other people's eyes. And, I was reading an article of a woman that was for this change. And, she had said that she lived in the neighborhood, in a single family neighborhood for years and years, decades. And now she's in favor of changing it. But and the reason she was in favor of changing it is because she's getting older and she wants to maybe make a single level place for her and then make something for her son. And her son can live in one and she can live in the other. But I was thinking to myself, I was like, wait a second. Well, that's great. But you got to enjoy this neighborhood the way it was for decades. And now all of a sudden you want to change it for yourself, which I understand where you're coming from. Hey, you should be able to do it with your land what you want. But I also felt like it was, I don't want to say almost selfish, but kind of hey, I got to use this land the way I wanted it to for 3 decades. Now I want to change it.
That's very fair, and I don't have a good comeback for that. I am reminded of a quote my dad told me once. I don't know where it came from, but it says, "We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant, and we drink from wells we did not dig." Now, in Arlington County, some of the biggest things that have happened is I-66 going through and literally ripping up people's houses in Maywood and Cherrydale and those neighborhoods, and literally people picketing on the streets. And then, the metro tunnels being dug in Arlington County, and you think people wanted a highway through this lovely county that we call Arlington? You think people wanted the metro? Maybe some people did. And, the next thing is changing the zoning and increasing the density. And I'm not really, my opinion doesn't really matter because no one cares, and it's not gonna change. So I'm kind of holding off on whether I'm gung ho or I kind of like the idea of townhouses, and I like the idea of density, and I love that there appears to be very stringent processes in place. I'm a little disappointed that I don't think civic associations in Arlington were included in the current in the county board meetings. I guess I'm encouraged that I think 2 to 3 of the sitting county board members are not going to be seeking re-election. So maybe if you loved the decision, if you despise the decision, you'll be able to voice your opinion at the next election. But ultimately, we're kind of progressing, and there were people that didn't want a highway, and now people are saying, let's build, more lanes of the highway. There are people that didn't want the metro, and now we're building more metro lines. So I'm not digging my heels in, but I'm kind of open to seeing what happens. And if something bad happens, hopefully they can fix it. And if something good happens, then it's better for all of us, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is change is hard, right? Change is hard in anything that we do. And I could completely understand picketing 66 when it was coming, but now we live with it and it's great. Yeah, I could completely see people picketing because they didn't want the metro coming through. Now we see it's pretty great, right? So I can understand right now people picketing because we don't want multifamily living right across the street from our single family home neighborhood that we've loved for so long. But that's the good thing about living in an area that hopefully they take this seriously and they look at the aesthetics of these things that are being built and they take into account public feedback and that they make the right decisions because, this issue can be very sensitive and a lot of the people that I've talked to were against it. Some of the people that I talked to were for it. And I can see both sides. That's the thing is I can see both sides. I completely understand it. If I had my way, maybe I'd choose one side or the other. But again, our opinion doesn't matter anymore because it's past. What we can do, like you said, is if you didn't like the decision, you can vote for somebody else to be in there to represent the views that you see. But change is coming to Arlington, and there's not much we can do about it at this point. The great thing is we still live in Arlington, and we love Arlington, and Arlington is honestly the best place to live. I'm so glad I live here. And, you think, oh, could I live at the beach or could I live there? And then you're like, man, we are so spoiled here. We have so much good stuff here, right?
Arlington is consistently ranking as the number 1 or number 2 best town, city, county in the entire nation. So it makes sense that properties cost $1.3 million, $2 million, $4 million. What should it cost? It shouldn't be cheap. It shouldn't be easy. It should be extremely difficult to afford properties in Arlington. Now, this proposal, which is passed, has now made it less difficult, which is a good thing. This is a good thing that properties are now going to be cheaper. The 3 townhouses for 1.3 is going to be cheaper than the 1 house for 2.3.
Yeah, and that's the argument that everybody wants to make is I need it to be cheaper. Well, listen, not everybody can live in Arlington, unfortunately, and that's just the way it is. It is one of the best places to live. It's very expensive to live here. And yeah, I had to work my butt off to get here. And I'll be honest, I worked and worked and worked. And you know me, Matt, right? You've known me for a long time. I didn't just able to buy the house that I bought. And thankfully I did buy it. But, there's some people that I've read in these articles and they just want to be like, oh, well, I can't do this and I want to be able to do it. Well, that's not the way life works, right? You can't just have it. You have to work for it. You have to, try to get another means of making the money to be able to afford here. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Arlington's very expensive. Like you said, there are other areas that are a little bit cheaper. You can start there and move up and move up. I mean, I'm not in the house that I bought 15, 20 years ago.
A couple of years ago, Shawn, I lived in Lyon Village, one of the
yes, he did.
Most prestigious, sought-after neighborhoods where properties routinely sell for over $3 million. And I afforded it. And I said, you know what? This property is above my budget. It's close to a metro. And Shawn, I deserve this. And so I went ahead and I lived in Lyon Village for 2 years. You want to know what I had? I had a basement apartment that was 250 square feet. I paid $1,075 for it. And I went one whole summer without any AC. And you know what my friends nicknamed it? They nicknamed it the murder dungeon. So, I afforded to live in Lyon Village with the means that I had available. And
you made sacrifices. And that's the thing is people have to make sacrifices to live in Arlington. It's just the way it is. And that's a great point. I mean, I went and visited Matt in his place. He made it really cool. I don't know that it was a legal apartment, but we'll just say it was.
The fire marshal could not have been happy with the way that apartment was set up.
There is no way. But he built this loft bed, man, and he made he made use of very small square footage. My first place that I owned, that I bought, was 550 square feet. And this was an old town. I couldn't afford the 550 square feet here in Arlington at the time. I moved there. Thankfully I was able to afford that, but this is the point, is like, we have to make sacrifices to be in Arlington. And I have made those sacrifices. I'm really happy here. I'm glad I did. And just know that everybody else is making sacrifices to be here as well. And, we have to learn to live as a community and see each other's viewpoints, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. And hopefully moving forward with this, we can kind of come together and as a community and just say, all right, what looks good? Let's agree on, since this is going to happen, let's agree on what looks good for the neighborhoods.
Now that this is approved, Shawn, what are we supposed to yell at each other now? Like,
we'll find something else.
Is it pickleball? Are we going to start yelling about pickleball and noise?
I think that's going to be the next.
Is that going to be the next thing?
It is going to be pickleball. That's a really good point, Matt.
Because we have to always be angry at one another as just being in Arlington. We got to be angry at something.
Well, I mean, in this world is angry.
We just scream into the abyss about Missing Middle, but I think now we might be screaming about pickleball.
Yeah, and the funny thing is you go on Open Door and,
Next Door,
and you look at people's posts.
Never go on Next Door.
Oh, it's awful. Don't go. You people that are on Next Door, I mean, I go on and I'll look at something and I'm like, oh my gosh, it just gets you so mad, right? People are fighting, and that's the point. The people that are on there are trying to get you angry, you know what I mean? So just stop going on there and just have fun in life, Let's live and have a good time, Matt.
So the permitting starts July 1st. There's 58, 5-year sunset cap. Now, if someone's getting a permit July 1st, the doors are opening of the multiplex, of the duplex, 16, 18 months, 24 months down the road. So we may not see the first Missing Middle housing inventory 12, 24 months down the line. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm a little cautious, a little concerned, but a little excited to see if all this fanfare will live up to the hype of providing technically more affordable housing in Arlington, which we desperately need.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to bring up, there's this house that's being built right now. It is actually a duplex. It's on Washington Boulevard, right inside Glebe Road. Do you know where I mean?
Yeah, that's a disgusting, ugly looking.
Thank you. That's exactly
horrible
what I was,
house.
And that's what we don't want. And this is pre.
I didn't know that was a duplex.
Yeah. It's pre-Missing Middle.
I didn't know what it was.
It's
humongous.
humongous.
Looked like a huge
it's just
box.
like a big wall box right against Washington Boulevard. Do you know how much each duplex is going for?
I have no idea.
$1.6 million. It's a huge structure, but it's ugly right now. And that thing right against Washington Boulevard is going for $1.6 each. So these things are not going to be Missing Middle affordable. These are going to be middle of the road sized places. I think those are pretty big, but it's a great location too. It's just inside Glebe Road, right around like Vermont Street or Utah Street, somewhere around there.
I think people watching know which house you're talking about.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list a few resources down in the description below. Now, Shawn and I could literally talk about this for 6 more hours. We're not going to do that. So there were clearly things that we maybe didn't cover enough or didn't go in depth enough, but we will touch on each thing that maybe we missed, in future videos. So, if you have any comments about Missing Middle, definitely leave them in the comments section down below. And for Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.